Hello and welcome to today's SCDN Policy Connection, Stormwater Management and Hazard Mitigation for Municipalities. My name is John Mukenya and I'm the Senior Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at Sustainable Pittsburgh. As a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and these materials will be shared after today's program. Please submit any questions via the Q&A box and we'll answer at the end. Feel free to enter your name and organization into the chat so folks know who's in attendance. As always, we strive to create a welcoming environment for all participants and encourage everyone to engage with respect and courtesy. Constructive discussions and diverse perspectives are valued, and we ask that all interactions remain professional and considerate. By participating in this webinar, you are helping to foster a positive experience where everyone can learn and contribute meaningfully. Next slide, please. At Sustainable Pittsburgh, our mission is to empower decision-making that builds a fundamentally equitable, resilient, and healthy and prosperous region. We're doing that through connecting our stakeholders and networks we host, such as the Sustainable Community Development Network, SCDN, to share knowledge of sustainability through resources and experiences to help make a region where all people may succeed. Sustainable Pittsburgh is committed to building the knowledge, perspective, and ability needed to create a better tomorrow for our region. We're optimistic, having worked with nearly 1,000 businesses, communities, and organizations to take action using our customized frameworks to track progress and simultaneously advance social equity, environmental stewardship, and prosperity. The strategic networks we host leverage the collective expertise and diverse perspectives within our region to ensure our communities can meet our challenges today and thrive into the future. That is why we've invited you all to attend today as part of our Sustainable Community Development Network, to learn together so we can act together. And together is how we co-create a fundamentally equitable, resilient, healthy, and prosperous region. We would like to thank our silver sponsor, Pitt, Ohio, for their support of Sustainable Pittsburgh to make programs like this possible. And we also like to extend our gratitude to our bronze sponsors for their ongoing support. For our agenda today, we're going to start with a quick overview of Sustainable Pittsburgh's recognition programs. These frameworks for municipalities, businesses, and other organizations to track and measure sustainability progress. After that, we'll get into an introduction on today's topic. First, we'll hear from Brad Ellis, Emergency Management Specialist with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, PEMA, who will provide an overview on hazard mitigation. Second, we'll hear from Beth Euler, Pennsylvania Director of the Center for Watershed Protection, who will discuss the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, also known as MS4. Third, we'll hear from Jason Singer, who serves as the Ward 4 Councilman for the town of McCandless, Pennsylvania, who will provide insight on stormwater management and hazard mitigation from a municipal lens. Lastly, we'll come back around for a Q&A session with all of our speakers. As a reminder, please use the Q&A box for any questions you may have. I'll now pass it on to my colleague, Sawyer Seidlinger, who will talk us through Sustainable Pennsylvania.
All right. To kick things off, I'll start by sharing a bit about Sustainable Pittsburgh's recognition programs. We have 4 programs altogether, 3 for businesses for the Southwestern Pennsylvania 10-county region, Sustainable Pittsburgh Shops tailored for small retail businesses, Sustainable Pittsburgh Restaurants suited for food businesses, Sustainable Pittsburgh Workplace, a catch-all for those that are not restaurants or shops. In addition to those 3 business programs, we have Sustainable Pennsylvania, a program created for municipalities across the state. More generally, each of these programs offer a step-by-step process to track, measure sustainability progress, as well as a framework that organizations can use to drive measurable impact while providing recognition for their sustainability achievements. Programs are based on best practices and have been peer-reviewed by knowledge experts. Programs are fluid, changing based on changes in needs, opportunity, and landscape, and opportunities for impact. Recognition comes in the form of bronze, silver, gold, and platinum level of designation or certification, and that is based off of overall sustainability performance and determined by completing an online assessment through a unique portal offered by Sustainable Pittsburgh. To date, we have our participation includes over 400 businesses, organizations, and municipalities, with dozens more working through the process. As many of you here are representative of the municipal audience, I'll share a bit more about the Sustainable Pennsylvania Certification Program. Managed by Sustainable Pittsburgh in partnership with the Pennsylvania Municipal League, the program offers strategies, resources, and recognition to municipalities for improving quality of life, expanding opportunities for everyone. It covers a comprehensive set of sustainability sustainability topics, provided step-by-step guidance for how your community can advance performance in areas such as waste and materials management, economic development and revitalization, parks and land conservation, as well as several other topics that can help build a more vibrant and resilient community. Spanning across the state, we currently have 139 municipalities that have earned their Sustainable Pennsylvania certification, touching over 4 million Pennsylvania residents. The Sustainable Pennsylvania program offers several benefits. First and foremost, it can help you baseline your municipality's current sustainability performance, as well as serve as an action plan for advancing your efforts. To help you advance your progress, the program also offers resources, tools, and best practices developed by over 60 advisors. Getting certified helps your community become recognized as a leader in sustainability. Once certified, you will receive a promotional kit, which includes a badge for your website, job postings, or other uses, and a press release template. We'll also share your achievements through the Sustainable Pittsburgh communication channels. The Sustainable Pennsylvania website also provides your municipality with a municipal profile for you to use to help inform your residents about the actions that you've taken as a municipality to further your sustainability journey. Lastly, Sustainable Pennsylvania certification is also recognized on the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development municipal funding applications, which can help a funding application stand out through clear demonstration of sustainability commitments and increase the chances for approval. There are just 4 steps for getting certified. First, you need to create an account. Use your phone camera. Take a moment right now and use your phone camera to capture this QR code. It will take you to our sign up page. You're going to scroll down to communities, click create an account, and fill out that page and click sign up. Once you have an account, the next step is to answer all the questions in the program. The program takes the form of an online assessment, and the questions are customized for municipalities. You can work with a team of colleagues to complete this assessment. And this is a great way to engage the folks at your municipality and get input across different departments, and is a pretty critical step for completing the assessment. Third, after you complete your assessment, submit it. Our staff will then provide feedback on your responses, and you'll have a chance to address before submitting your final answers. Last, you'll earn bronze, silver, gold, or platinum certification based on 2 criteria: the total percentage of points you've earned throughout the assessment, and if you've completed required actions for each level. There's no deadline to participate. Certifications expire every 3 years. And now I will pass it back to my colleague, John.
Thank you so much for that overview. We're excited to have you all join us for today's discussion, Stormwater Management and Hazard Mitigation for Municipalities. So why are we focusing on this now? As Sustainable Pittsburgh, we understand that managing stormwater, preparing for climate hazards are no longer optional. We recognize they're essential to protecting the health, safety, and future of our communities. Recent storms across Pennsylvania have served as a wake-up call, flooding streets and neighborhoods, damaging infrastructure, and exposing the vulnerabilities many municipalities face. These events are not isolated. They reflect a broader trend, more frequent and intense weather driven by a changing climate. Poor stormwater systems and inadequate hazard planning have real consequences for equity, public health, and local economies. Flooding doesn't affect all neighborhoods equally, as those with the fewest resources are often hit the hardest and recover the slowest. And when roads, schools, and businesses are disrupted, entire communities feel the impact. Today's session comes at a critical time. With state resilience funding opportunities available, municipalities have a window to strengthen the infrastructure, build green stormwater solutions, and reduce risk before the next disaster strikes. Proactive planning is both a sign of good governance and a step towards a more sustainable, more equitable future for every Pennsylvania community. So, without further ado, let's begin our conversation and explore how local governments can lead with resilience, preparedness, and long-term vision. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Brad. Brad Ellis joined the PA Emergency Management Agency in May 2024 after working at the Pennsylvania Department of Human Services. He enjoys exploring a wide range of funding opportunities to expand his knowledge and currently serves as PEMA's program specialist for the Flood Mitigation Assistance and Flood Mitigation Assistance SWIFT current grants. Welcome, Brad.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. So I'll be substituting in for our State Hazard Mitigation Officer, Rick Deal, who unfortunately was not able to make it. So we'll keep his family in our thoughts and prayers going forward. I'll be providing a high-level overview of who we are, the various types of grant programs that we have available for you guys, and then kind of our priority order going forward. The next slide, please. So at Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, our high-level mission is to help people prepare for, respond to, and recover from various emergencies they run into, such as those of natural disasters, acts of terrorism, or other human-made disasters. We have lots of various partners at the federal and state level, going all the way down to people you encounter at the local level, such as volunteer organizations, private sector businesses, municipalities, and then often even individual citizens, primarily homeowners who are interested in hazard mitigation. Next slide, please. So a lot of times people think about our agency at the state level that we're, the big government coming in, and we're not actually that large. We only have 4 physical locations throughout the Commonwealth, 3 of them being our regional offices, which I'll go over in a second, and then our headquarters where I work at Harrisburg. We have a combined staff of 182 employees, although we do partner with 2479 municipal emergency management coordinators. Despite having a relatively small staff, we do have a very large footprint. For example, in fiscal year 2022, we had almost $993 million of federal grant funding combined for various projects scattered throughout the Commonwealth. Next slide, please. As far as the area offices go, so again, headquarters is going to be located in Harrisburg, but we are divided on a north-south axis. So we have PEMA Western, Central, and Eastern, who often handle things at the local level. So we have 24, 23, and 20 counters for each area, respectively. Next slide, please. For my unit specifically, so we are MERC, Mitigation, Insurance, and Resilient Communities. We have 6 employees handling a combined amount of 158 individual projects worth around $187.6 million in funding. Collectively, we serve to administer 8 different programs at the state level, which I'll be going through one at a time at a broad high-level overview. Next slide, please. So these programs, it wouldn't be the government if we didn't love our acronyms. So unfortunately, you'll see these pop up multiple times going forward. So we have the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is almost our flagship, as it were. This will come up a lot after disasters. And most of these will be related to flooding, flood mitigation, stormwater management, and things of that nature. But again, I'll go through these one at a time. Next slide, please. So up first, we have the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, also known as HMGP. So this one will become available to the Commonwealth after there's a federal disaster declaration. I believe the most recent one was Tropical Storm Debbie. The funding stream from this is we get a 20% set aside from public assistance and some of the individual assistance programs. So for example, if they were to receive $100,000, we would have $20,000 set for us. The cost share for projects awarded under this grant program is 75% federal and 25% non-federal. In this instance, the non-federal cost share is picked up by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so you guys don't have to worry about anything there. Although it is a little bit slow, the awards typically come out between 18 and 30 months after the disaster event in question, so just keep that in mind. Next slide, please. The second grant program, and this is one of the ones that I'm particularly in charge of, is going to be Flood Mitigation Assistance Swift Current. Unlike the regular flood mitigation assistance, which is annually competitive, this one is specifically tied to, again, the federally declared disaster declaration. There is the extra requirement of any community that's going to be trying to apply for these funds has to be participating in the National Flood Insurance Program, which is legally required in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but not everybody does that. Unlike the hazard mitigation grant program, the non-federal cost share on this is not covered by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and it does change depending on the circumstances. The default remains at 75/25, although if an individual property owner is known to be repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss, the federal cost share will increase accordingly to 90/10 or 100% federal in the worst case, or the best case for us. Next slide, please. Next up, we have the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, so CDBG-DR. That's a lot to say. So this one goes through the U.S. Housing and Urban Development, and it is based on the census tract. These ones are 100% federally funded. However, acquisition projects going through this are administered by us at the state level rather through HUD. Next slide. So elephant in the room. We decided to keep this one in there just to let people kind of know what's going on. So building resilient infrastructure communities is one of the grant programs that we had available that a lot of people were looking forward to, but unfortunately was cut by the federal government going forward. So we're working on the projects we have and closing those out. But if it does come back through some legal action, we decided to keep this in here. This particular grant program was generally focused on planning, updating codes and standards of building codes, nature-based solutions, these larger community-wide projects. We typically got used to seeing around $2 million come in. And again, that was at the 75%, 25% non-federal cost share, as it was a competitive annual project application. Next slide, please. Next up, we have legislative CDS, so congressionally directed spending or pre-disaster mitigation. This used to just be pre-disaster mitigation, and that's kind of evolved going forward. So these ones will go through congressionally directed spending. And then again, 75%, 25%, you'll see that a lot going forward. These are usually the larger nature-based solution projects or community-wide infrastructure ranging from around $3 to $10 million. So not so much on the smaller side here. These are larger ticket items. Next slide, please. So another one of the ones that I handle is just the regular flood mitigation assistance. This one is different from Swift Current in that it is annually competitive, typically opening up every fall for reducing long-term damages to the National Flood Insurance Program. So this is focused usually on specific properties or community-wide projects that will reduce damages to specific properties, such as stormwater management. The default remains at 75/25, although like in the Swift Current program, if we're looking at individual instances where people are known to be repetitive or severe repetitive loss, that cost share will increase to 90/10 or 100% federal. Keep in mind, if we're looking at this program, it is nationally competitive. So all of the applications will come in from across the nation and get ranked against each other, and only the best ones will go forward. The other ones we can reapply the next year or look at other alternatives. Next slide, please. High hazard potential dams. So we do have a staff member in our office whose job is specifically to handle these, as there's just so much difference between them and the ones we typically handle for home acquisitions and elevations. These we handle alongside Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, so PADEP, and they're constantly on the phone with each other. Any dams that we're looking to put in here for these sources of funding, they do have to be specifically identified by DEP as a rehabilitation high hazard potential dam. If it hasn't been identified, it's not going to be eligible for funding. And it has a unique cost share we don't typically see at 65% federal, 35% non-federal. Again, the normal being 75/25, so this one's a little bit different. And it is on an annual cycle. Next slide, please. As far as the types of projects that we're looking at, I know I talked about hazard mitigation grant programs, the flood mitigation assistance, and just all the different options we have. As far as what we want to accomplish with these, the top two items, number 1 and 2, typically revolve around planning. The 5% state initiative, a lot of that is used for planning to help people update either the county or municipal hazard mitigation plans. After that, we have a priority for acquisition and demolition projects. There's not going to be any long-term risk of flood damages to people if they're no longer living in the special flood hazard area. So we like to remove them from there wherever possible. If that's not an option, if they want to remain there, or if we just can't get an acquisition project to go through, the next best alternative is to elevate them. Or if we can't safely elevate the property, we'll tear it down and rebuild it in compliance with National Flood Insurance Program standards. So mitigation reconstruction. So the house will remain there in the same footprint, but it'll be elevated above the base flood elevation, reduce those long-term risks. The other items we have, if we're not quite sure of what project would be best in an area, we can submit for a scoping project, which would be having engineers come in to perform a study or surveys to gather information to generate one of the other project types, or even put that information into a different project grant program entirely. It's also gray infrastructure. So this will be a lot of your stormwater management projects, flood control, floodgates, and so on. And then the number 8th priority is going to be any sort of green infrastructure, flood bank stabilization, anything along those lines. Next slide, please. As far as big ticket items coming up, so what's next? Again, BRIC is on the way out. It's not going to be something going forward, and even some of the funds awarded have been pulled back. So that is a big loss there. To help compensate for that, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as a whole is looking to develop our own state level programs. So we want to have a state public infrastructure, or PI, and a hazard mitigation, or HM program. It's going to be similar to something you may have seen roll out before for individual assistance called DRAP, where the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania tries to put our own money forward to help make up for shortfalls at the federal level or things that have been lost since then. That doesn't exist right now, but it is something in the works that hopefully will be coming through in the next year or so. Next slide, please. So we did leave Rick's contact information on here. So if you have any specific concerns or questions about any potential issues, feel free to reach out to him. Alternatively, if you were to go on pa.gov and search up hazard mitigation grants, there's a wonderful page there that they just rebuilt that goes through all of the different types of programs, the various things you can do with the funding, and it also includes the link to our resource account, which we'll try and send out afterwards. That should be everything I have.
Thank you so much, Brad. So next, we are very excited to introduce our next speaker, Beth Euler. So Beth Euler is the Pennsylvania Director for the Center for Watershed Protection, and she brings more than 20 years of experience in stormwater management, watershed planning, and environmental policy. She also serves as Vice Chair of the Pennsylvania DEP's Water Resources Advisory Committee. So welcome, Beth.
Thanks, John. Appreciate the introduction. I appreciate being here today and the invitation. So today I'm going to be talking really briefly about the MS4 permit, the draft MS4 permit that has been proposed by DEP, and the changes that it has incurred in the relationship it has to more to realize things like flooding, as opposed to some of the differences in the current permit. So next slide, please. Historically, we've kind of put the impacts of stormwater into 2 buckets, and that's water quality, which we think of as, pollutants kind of laying on the surface of the ground that get picked up as rain falls from the sky and runs off into streams. And then we also have water quantity, which is, our flooding issues and excessive stream erosion. But what we don't really talk about a lot, and I think what this new permit is really trying to resolve, is the connection between the 2 issues that we have. Water quantity, flooding, is also directly related to water quality, especially when it comes to urban sources. And so the pollutants that we're trying to address through some of the mechanisms in our current municipal separate storm sewer system permit are things like sediment and nutrients. And from urban sources, these sediment and nutrients aren't just laying on the ground. Yes, sometimes they are, yes, but the majority of it is coming from related to water quantity sources. So it's historic development, where we have quantities of stormwater falling onto impervious surfaces and running off into the streams without any mechanism to slow it down and release it slowly. So like stormwater basins. So we're talking about all of the development that we've had happen pre-regulation, and then even pre when phase 2 stormwater regulations came out and made everything a little bit more stringent. And so again, historically, the MS4 permit is focused more on water quality and communicating it that way. And then I think the new permit, at least portions of it, are going to be looking more about how we can address water quantity and accomplish the same goals of addressing water quality with, from urban sources. Next slide, please. So what's the new permit all about? We're talking about the general permit. So in Pennsylvania, there's 2 different types of phase 2 small MS4 permits. There's a general permit and an individual permit. And the general permit is kind of what I guess the majority of MS4 municipalities would have. They're on the same time cycle. So they all were expired on March 15th, 2023. And we didn't have a new permit ready from DEP yet. So at that point, DEP extended it once, and then they extended it ultimately indefinitely until the next PAG 13 is finalized. And so again, we're not talking about the individual permit, but historically, what's been incorporated into the general permit has also been incorporated into the individual permit, with like a major exception of the TMDL plan. So concurrently, there's also a draft post-construction stormwater management manual that's anticipated to be finalized in 2026. And so a lot of the new permit is also consistent with this draft manual that we're waiting for. That's designed to replace the Pennsylvania Stormwater Best Management Practice Manual from 2006. So a key thing that I just wanted to mention here is that the terminology is going to change somewhat significantly in the new MS4 permit, as well as the new post-construction stormwater management manual. If you haven't heard that, we generally talk about all of our stormwater management facilities, basins, barrier retentions, swales, things like that as best management practices or BMPs. And that term in this stormwater management manual is non-existent, and we're going to be referring to them now as stormwater control measures, or SCMs. So BMP equals SCM once these documents are finalized. Next slide, please. So who's this going to impact in Pennsylvania? What, just for an example, I took sampling of the counties that have a portion of their jurisdiction that extend into the Ohio River Basin. And this is, basically the current permit term. So we have 164 general permits in the Ohio River Basin counties, and then 146 waivers of general permits. So this new general permit is going to impact all of these people, maybe some additional municipalities based on the 2020 urban area from the 2020 US Census, which we don't think has really changed dramatically, but DEP has posted a new regulatory urban area boundary on their website. That's something that I don't think I put in the resources at the end of this, but I can follow up with a link. Again, not talking about the individual permit quite yet, but we anticipate a lot of it to be similar. Next slide. So DEP came up with this new permit through a lot of input from a work group that was assembled back in 2022. There was about 20 different professionals with expertise in MS4 and an interest in water quality from different sectors throughout the state. And I was a part of that, and there were some key input and recommendations. And this list came from a presentation that DEP Central Office has done, where they conveyed what really were the key takeaways for them to help build this permit. One was increased planning time. So this current permit, if you had a pollutant reduction plan requirement, there was an awful lot of work that needed to be done in a very small amount of time to be submitted with the notice of intent or the permit renewal. And so that time crunch didn't really allow for quality plans to be developed, good projects to be proposed and vetted, and then also ample time for collaboration, cross jurisdictional collaboration to occur. And so that was something that was needed. Standardizing reduction requirement calculations for 2 purposes, really. One is to also promote collaboration, because when you're working together, you can't really compare apples to oranges with the methods in which you're quantifying your baseline loading or your baseline requirements. But then also to create kind of an equity amongst all permittees, that we're all starting from the same starting block. And that kind of also relates to the fourth bullet down when we're talking about we need to consider socioeconomic factors when determining requirements. There is something that's stated in the MS4 permit and the Code of Federal Regulations that permittees have to minimize pollutants or reduce pollutants to the maximum extent practicable. So the MEP, or the maximum extent practicable. That's not defined anywhere, what maximum extent practicable means. And so kind of the need to define what that is, and is it different for different municipalities, because not every municipality has the same tax base, and that sort of thing. And another thing that was interesting was the focus of runoff volume reduction instead of pollutant load reduction. And that was kind of a result of the fact that in the last permit term, it was difficult to communicate that we were talking about managing volume to reduce sediment in our streams. And so that providing that connection, kind of like I was talking about earlier with water quality versus water quantity and how the two are related, I think is what has kind of initiated this shift in a volume management objective instead of a sediment objective when it comes to addressing sediment and nutrient impairments. And then finally, actually incentivizing collaborations as opposed to just saying, yes, we allow for municipalities to work together to address these requirements, something to incentivize them so that we can have the possibility of bigger and more meaningful projects that may have co-benefits like addressing or reducing flooding, things like that. Next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of our current NPDES MS4 program components under the 2018 permit. Of course, we have our PRPs that were for stormwater discharges to streams impaired for sediment and nutrients, TMDLs for the same impairments, and then pollutant control measures for stormwater discharges to streams impaired for acid mine drainage, PCBs, and their pathogens. Then we have our 6 minimum control measures, which every state has some version of the 6 minimum control measures to comply with the Code of Federal Regulations. Something not listed here, should mention, is the model ordinance, which is also very important, but we don't have time to delve into today. So the biggest changes are, you click again, there we go. The replacement of the PRPs with the volume management plans to achieve the same goal of reducing sediment and nutrient pollution to our streams. And then as far as the total maximum daily load plans go, that's kind of TBD at this point. Those are individual permittees, not included in the general permit. So DEP is still developing what that program is going to look like. Also, one of the other, I guess, somewhat major changes is just the discontinuation of the pollutant control measures for this permit term. So the DEP has time to review and digest the information that was submitted by municipalities as part of that kind of research and enforcement exercise to address those impairments. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot of how the pollutant reduction plan and volume management plans kind of compare. And so, as I mentioned before, the pollutant reduction plans had a lot of work that needed to occur within a short period of time to be submitted by September 2017 if you were a general permittee for approval as part of that 2018 permit. So DEP did listen to the input and said, hey, okay, let's just start with determining what the baseline requirement would be for the municipalities that have a volume management plan requirement. So they developed what's called a maximum extent practicable spreadsheet calculator that will need to be completed and submitted with a notice of intent by September 30th, 2026, which would determine a municipality's annual volume management objective. From then, you have 2 years to develop a volume management plan and submit to DEP. One caveat is that DEP wants to see more information associated with the proposed stormwater control measures compared to what the pollutant reduction plans required. So they want you to vet those proposed SCMs a little bit more thoroughly to make sure they're actually implementable. Maybe not necessarily a bad thing, but a little bit more effort than just a traditional planning exercise. And then 2 years of implementation in this permit would be years 4 and 5 to implement that annualized volume management objective that's determined by the spreadsheet calculator. Those dates are all very tentative as this permit is still in draft form. It was out for public comment and DEP is currently addressing those comments. So it's yet to be determined whether these are it's unlikely that these dates are going to still be consistent with what's in the current draft. Next slide, please. So municipalities that have a volume management plan requirement are likely going to be those that have the pollutant reduction plan requirement currently. And then maybe some additional municipalities, because DEP has added some impairments that will kick that requirement in that are related to sediment that may be new or additional as part of the PADEP integrated water quality report. So the ultimate goal of the volume management plan is to attain water quality standards, right? Get rid of all those stream impairments. That's what our goal is. By the way that they propose to do that is, and why we are filling out what's called the maximum extent practicable calculator spreadsheet, is to treat 88% of impervious area within the census defined urban area through stormwater control measures implemented over a 50-year period of time. Why 88%? Because there are studies that have been done that have said that 88% is the threshold at which streams become impaired. So, you can have some runoff from impervious surfaces that's uncontrolled or unmanaged, and still, not have a significant impact on streams when you consider some outside sources. But the studies that have been done have shown that 88% is kind of a general good planning number for that. So what does treat mean? Treat means stormwater control measures that reduce or manage the 1-inch runoff volume by evapotranspiration and or infiltration and or managed release concept. So these are all practices that have some sort of volume management component. Now, there are a few exceptions to these rules, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide. This is just a quick snapshot of what the maximum extent practicable calculator looks like, at least the main page of it. It's based again on impervious area within the urban area. So you have to enter those quantities in. The goal of treating 88% of impervious area over a 50-year period of time is going to be documented through some additional tabs in the spreadsheet, which would be called your stormwater control measure inventory. Now, there's a lot of existing stormwater control measures that could be entered into this inventory to show progress towards treating 88% of impervious from your BMP inventory that's part of MCM5 with some additional information that wasn't required to be tracked from previous current permit terms. So in order to show that progress, there's going to be some work that needs to be done to generate that. But then there's other things like a feasibility index that is applied, which really is part of what's determining that maximum extent practicable for a particular municipality. And then a collaboration credit. So this is the incentivization of collaboration that we're talking about earlier based on that work group input, is that if you work with the more municipalities that you work with on a volume management plan, the lower your volume management objective will be. And so that's some clear incentive to work together to potentially have the opportunity to do bigger and more meaningful projects, put projects in better locations where we're actually addressing co-benefits like flooding and things like that. So that's just going to extend that 50-year timeline out, and it doesn't absolve you from ever doing it. Next slide. So your volume management plan, there's a lot of little caveats around it in the draft permit, but generally speaking, we have to have a volume management component. So things that just address sediment and we have historically implemented, like street sweeping and inlet cleaning and stream restoration without a floodplain restoration component, are going to be disincentivized and possibly not very good solutions long-term to address your volume management plan. All the stormwater control measures are consistent with the draft post-construction stormwater management manual. And this is a good kicker here too, is that they can be located anywhere within the municipal boundary. And if you're collaborating with multiple municipalities, can be anywhere within any of those municipal boundaries. So that really is going to be helpful when we're talking about getting projects in good locations, not just where it's most convenient. Additionally, I wanted to mention that DEP is offering, as part of the draft permit, a 10% credit for your volume management plan if you can prove that it's going to help to alleviate local flooding. And so I think some more details will come on that. Next slide. So just some recommendations moving forward is that, really, if you're a municipality or you work with municipalities and you're interested in how to continue this move forward or being proactive towards the next permit term, is review those draft PAG 13 documents to get an idea of where we think. Public comment period is over, but that doesn't mean that DEP is not listening. If you see anything that concerns you, they're always there to take some additional feedback. Another thing would be to shift the mindset and messaging from sediment reduction to volume reduction, which I think is something that's going to be beneficial just in general to help to explain why we're installing these volume management practices, which we were historically in this current permit term to address sediment reduction. And then consider those stormwater control measure types for future implementation. So if implementing things that have a volume management component to it. And finally, promoting collaboration is going to be key. And if you are a municipality, starting to talk to your neighbors, if you haven't already, is also going to be key, which I think Jason's going to be talking about a little bit after this. So next slide. Center for Watershed Protection's developed a collaboration toolkit, and this is consistent with the current permit term. We're going to be updating it for consistency with the new permit as it gets closer to finalization, but there's a lot of great tools and information and guidebook in there moving forward. Next slide, please. There we go. Some technical resources. This is just some links to a lot of the key documents that we were talking about throughout this presentation. And then the next slide has some funding resources in addition to the resources that Bradley was talking about earlier. Next slide. And then that's all I have for you today. I'll be happy to answer any questions in the chat or at the Q&A time at the end of the session.
Thank you so much, Beth. Last but not least, we're proud to welcome Jason. Jason Singer is president of McCandless Town Council and owner of AOM Consultants, where he focuses on practical guidance and sustainable stormwater solutions through regional collaboration and municipal partnerships. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that introduction. So I am council president for Town of McCandless, and I'm going to go through a little bit about our stormwater modernization today and how this affects local government. As you heard from Beth, changes are coming. It seems to be that they come, in 5-year intervals. Like many local government representatives, we see these as a concern. And I just want to walk you kind of through how we handle these in the town of McCandless over the last 5-year cycle. So we'll start off here with the modernization. If we can go ahead to the next slide. Kind of the highlight of our process. So stormwater before 2019 in McCandless was very stagnant. We had a lot of in-house stormwater management basins that we maintained, a stormwater code that was evolving, but slowly, a mix of private HOA ponds, commercial ponds, bioswales, things that affect. It was just a little bit all over the place. So when I came on to council, we were in the process of updating our ordinances, trying to make them a little more stringent, making sure that they promoted development, but promoted responsible development. We ourselves looked at stormwater management fees, both for existing residents, for new residents. Discussions were had about, doing impact fee areas, things to that effect. And then on the flip side of that, we looked at some of, what of our existing infrastructure was and how we were going to handle that. And that led us more into a little bit of how, we were going to work within our public works, our planning departments, engineering, and how all of our areas within our town government were going to function in stormwater going forward. Next slide, please. So where we were is kind of sets the basis of, what does McCandless look like? We have many people here today with all different kinds of municipalities, and that's Pennsylvania. We have the Chesapeake Bay side on one side, the Ohio River Basin on the other, and there are differences north, south, east, west. And I have that in my own municipality with, next slide, please, generational developments. We had, housing starting in the 50s with simplistic small little homes, dense urban planning. Those roads, and I grew up in one as a kid, they didn't have curbs on the streets. When it rained, that water ran into your yard. And over time, and as the town had continued to develop in the 80s and 90s, we started to see some of our very first stormwater. Some basic basins, some piping, and a little bit of restriction. And then we carried into the 90s, where we got more advanced. The creation of HOAs, some private stormwater, and that's the town of McCandless really summarizes Pennsylvania stormwater. We have the legacy development that has very few stormwater controls and high cost to implement them. We have the 80s and 90s development where efforts were made, but unfortunately the town is saddled with the maintenance and upkeep. And then we have the 2000s in more in our development now, where we are saddled with more of a regulatory agency with private stormwater. And that defines Pennsylvania stormwater. The same that the previous two speakers talked about is kind of where we're at. The town is about a population of 30,000. And we run a budget anywhere, depending upon year and structures, of 15 to 25 million. Varies with capital improvements and things that from there. So infrastructure changes in the town. As I said, we have some streets that were paved in the 90s and curbs were added and smooth line pipe was added. And a lot of that older stormwater, unfortunately, speed velocity increased to our streams, which increased flooding issues. As we continue to move forward and we continue increasing paving budgets and infrastructure changes, it's become a burden on our town resources. We have in our municipality 60 basins that are owned and maintained by the town on a yearly basis. Sedimentation, the MS4 requirements, all of those things impact us there. And the cost of upkeep is definitely, becoming an issue. Constant changes of rules and regulations. It seems that every 5 years, the state gives us a different line of where we're going. You've heard from Beth previously that, we went from water quality, now we're focusing more on water quantities. And, as a local government official, we have to be mindful of where we're going, how we're planning financially and development wise with that. So one of the first things that a legislator can do is, look at your ordinances and see what we can do. Next slide, please. And what we did was we wanted to update our stormwater ordinance. The town had like I said, a pretty stagnant ordinance, but it wasn't, I would say, loose. It was comprehensive, but it needed some tweaks. So that was why, why I need to review the ordinance. We were getting some complaints from residents, issues about flooding, issues about water quality, things to that effect, and that prompted it. And, what did we change? We made some subtle changes about how we were inspecting things, how we were, stormwater is not just all fits in one box. We needed to find a way to make sure we could handle stormwater for single individual houses as well as 400 unit subdivisions. And we broke in our ordinance into majors and minors and gave it a little bit of flexibility, because what functions for a 1 or 2 lot subdivision is not going to be the same as a 400 unit subdivision. And what functions maybe in one watershed might not be the same in the other. So we really broke down our ordinance, working with consultants and our engineers, and brought it more into what would work for us and what would work for our residents. So some minor and major modifications we did a lot of work in. We worked with our current engineering firm about how we were going to do inspections in-house, private inspections, establishing escrows and things like that. So really just dug into the nitty-gritty and tweaked all the things. And we came out, both council, residents, feeling that we had a very good ordinance going forward, and we actually feel that we have one of the stronger ones now in Allegheny County. Impactful changes, as a council person, you want to hear feedback, what's it like, and how is development, and are developers complaining, are homeowners complaining, what is it? And it's a fine line. You want to allow development, but you want it to be responsible. And within the first year or two, I'm connected enough with the construction there. You hear all of a sudden, well, hey, McAllen's got a little harder now. I didn't realize that that new ordinance was going to have all these different requirements, and it's not enough to deter it, but it's enough that people notice, and that's what we were going for. That's the impactful changes. Is we're seeing that the development community is appreciative of what we're doing and increasing that. We're seeing that in resident concerns. Residents are buying into hey, I can't just repave my driveway without thinking about what that's going to do. I can't just add that 30 by 20 addition without making sure we are doing that with neighbors. So we heard positive things on both sides. How did we go about doing that? Community input, and local government. That's the key anymore. Is you throw it out there, you start to get impact from neighbors of the things that are happening, and that's going to be what we talk about here. The rest of this is making sure we listen to concerns and finding ways to address them. Next up, please. So one of the biggest things, once you change your ordinance and, once you start to identify these problems and you hear this from residents and concerns, is stormwater fees. Is there a way or is there a need to associate some sort of revenue source for the costs that are inhibited from all of these changes? And, we took a break and we said, what's a stormwater fee? What's it look like? Are there other options and things like that? Next slide, please. So what we did was we formed a stormwater committee, and the purpose of this committee, with my background, was to look at this a little more in depth before we just jump down one way or the other here with a stormwater fee. As many of you know, stormwater fees are popular, and I'm not for or against them necessarily. I think they serve their purpose in some municipalities, and I think certain municipalities, there's way to possibly avoid them with proper phasing. As many as you know, there is some court cases out there about the feasibility of these and who can be charged for them and those items. And, that's going to continue to be figured out as time goes on. But we started at the town with creating a stormwater committee. And the reason we did this first was, we wanted to make sure that we got some resident input. We wanted to make sure we could use some of the expertise skills from myself, from others in our municipality. We wanted to make sure we were good stewards of our finance before we just jumped right in with the fee and things of that effect. We wanted to get with that. We wanted to understand what we were evaluating. What are we going to do with this? As we're constantly changing these rules and regulations, we need a specialized subgroup of, someone who can look and see where we are at now and where we are going. Next slide, please. So one of our things we went through was, stormwater fee, stormwater review. The fee, the purpose, you have projects that you need out there. You need revenue now to start doing it. And what's that outcome look like? Is it a one-time fee? Is it something we're trying to bring all of our projects up to date within a certain time frame? Is this a long-term that it will continue forever? Those were some of the questions we had and residents' concerns. We initially started in with, we worked with our engineer. We talked that, we might have anywhere from $3 to $5 million worth of stormwater upgrades and improvements over the time period. And we talked about, do we budget that for this? How long? Things like that. So a lot of problems came up with that of how that would look in resident inputs and finances. It always comes down to the money. And that was something, nobody wanted to rush into. So what we did was we kind of pumped our brakes on the stormwater fee, and we decided that the committee and the town government would look at a stormwater review. And we would make some initial investment with our town engineer, and they would evaluate and get us more hard numbers instead of a generalization of where we were. And the big thing about that was we chose to work with them and do a phasing approach. So we had our engineer go around the town, look at our infrastructures, look at our basins, look at where we stood with our pollution reduction control projects and stream bank restorations. And we started putting together a plan and phasing that. One of the biggest things we did was we identified our problem areas. In today's world with GIS technology and all the technology at our hands, we really were able to focus on our problem areas, our resident concerns, and able to work with our engineer and contractors to do value engineering. and we were able to double down in some of our projects that we did. We worked with other municipalities on things, we worked with other partners. And that's kind of where we're leading into this of, this new, as Beth said, the new VMPs that are coming are going to be benefited with collaboration. And we had projects that we work with our sanitary authority. Our sanitary authority is constantly upgrading lines. They're doing encasement projects. And we see that as a 50-50 split where they need to go in, they need to repair their lines, and we needed at that time stream bank restoration. It was a great collaboration, two municipal authorities being able to work together, and two birds, one stone, great thing. Another area of great collaboration that we were able to work with in the town was we were actually able to collaborate with private industry. A developer in another municipality had needed offset for stream bank restoration. He didn't have that option within his development. He reached out to us through our engineer, and we were able to work on a public-private partnership for stream bank restoration as part of our pollution reduction. And there's multiple ways. You just have to think outside the box. But because it's going to be more incentivized in this next round, it's going to be a wonderful thing going forward. So just a little highlight here, stormwater fee, stormwater review. For right now, we did a review. We've kind of phased our approach to things. Is a fee in our future? Quite possibly, as they continue to change rules and regulations and as projects become bigger and bigger, we may end up there, and I'm perfectly fine with it. But it has built a basis of how we can justify that to our residents and our constituents at that point. Next slide, please. So a little bit of a wrap up here, on what we changed internally. So for those of you in local government, we had our review, we redid our ordinance. What we started to implement was some public work changes. We had some staffing changes. We designated certain people within our public works of stormwater experts, people that could go out and maintain and understand these. And we worked with our Parks and Recs division so that they could start doing maintenance of these facilities in the fall and winter time when they're not working on parks and recreation necessarily as much. So we did some staffing changes, using stuff in-house, not necessarily adding anyone, but just redefining those roles. We did invest heavily in some resources and equipment for the 60 basins, which is a large amount for a municipality. We invested in some specialized clearing. We invested in some smaller equipment to do some repairs and maintenance in those items. But we did put that into our capital improvement plan, and we did that over time. It was not a lot of one-time investment. Knowing that came out of our review and knowing that came out of our planning of this, we were able to plan that into our replacements over time. And, we didn't necessarily buy tractor loader backhoes again, which was ideal for just street work. We bought mini excavators that could also do the street work, but also work in storm ponds as necessary. So it was phased out over time of that change. As far as planning and building, we worked with our code enforcement and our zoning departments, and we started to develop a system of how they would help with inspections on more of the private stormwater side and how they could be resources and things to that effect. So we kind of rewrote their roles and implemented that into there. We worked with our town engineers on retrofits of our existing storm ponds. And that's what I think you're going to see a lot in the next permit cycle here is, retrofits to existing basins. How can we gain volume reduction? We've started doing that. We're doing about anywhere from, 4 to 6 a year. Sometimes they're as simple as some plate restrictors on existing outlets, and sometimes they're a lot of rebuilds. But that's something you might see. But your town engineer will be a huge help with finding, that low hanging fruit. And that's part of our phasing approach. We're working on low hanging fruit. And to kind of wrap it up with what you've heard about the MS4 updates coming from Beth is that collaboration thing. What we've really done is we brought this more up to our COG. Town of McCandless is part of the North Hills Council of Governments. And watersheds are, watersheds extend past municipal boundaries. And a lot of times you'll find that your sanitary authorities, your sanitary COGs, and even your COGs are watershed based. we all share common problems, and it's typically water based. So the town, is being more active in our council of government. We are trying to work with them more. There is a stormwater committee in the council of government. It will continue to grow. It will be a big part going forward, with the new updates coming, as well as, partners that we see here today. The Center for Watershed Protection is providing a ton of resources for municipalities. Sustainable Pittsburgh as well. These organizations will be the provider of collaboration, and that's going to be really beneficial from the top of the watershed to the bottom of the watershed. So that, in summary, is a town council person's view of how things are going and how you might have the ability to change that. Next slide. My contact information is here on this page as well. I think it will be emailed and available to you. I am Stormwater. I love it. I live it. I could talk about it for hours and hours. By all means, if you ever have any questions, you're always more than welcome to reach out to me. I always appreciate solving some problems. So thank you very much for the time today.
Thank you so much, Jason. And thank you, Brad and Beth. Panelists, if you don't mind turning your cameras back on and joining me on screen, and we'll begin the Q&A portion of today's webinar. Once again, if you have a question for Sustainable Pittsburgh or any of our speakers today, please put your questions in the Q&A box. Right? The first question we have here is there an anticipated timeline for the new MS Wharf?
Yeah, so the currently, if you have a general permit or a waiver of general permit, they are proposing that the notice of intents or the waiver renewal would be due September 30th, 2026. But the permit's not finalized yet. So more than likely that's going to get pushed back. We're just waiting on hearing whether it's going to be pushed back at this point. And again, if you are still implementing a pollutant reduction plan, that's not, that's something that you have to continue to implement, even if you weren't able to meet the deadline, your 5-year implementation deadline, per the schedule you outlined in your PRP final report for compliance.
Thank you.
You know what this means? We did so well. There are no questions to be had.
What is one major takeaway you would like municipalities to have? Like, if we could summarize everything you said, would it be like a crucial thing for the municipalities here to know?
Myself, I would tell you, the biggest thing is don't get overwhelmed with these. I know I've been in a lot of municipalities, and it's a confusion thing. It's the alphabet soup. Beth says it. It's the acronyms alone will bury you in worry and confusion. And as we've had enough time to see over the last 2 or 3 cycles, you have enough time. There's no need to rush. It's better to be more thought out on this and to take your time and make sure you do it right and work with the resources at hand. Because I have seen a few municipalities rush it, do it wrong, and spend more than was necessary. And I think, where we're at today with the amount of help out there and the amount of knowledge, you can put together very competent plans at an affordable price, and that's what, as local government, that's what we're trying to do. So, take your time, consider phasing things, considering using all the resources and talking to others. Don't be a rush just to check that box.
Yeah, I think what I would like to give away, like as a takeaway too, is that I know it's frustrating when things change and everyone has this mentality of it's a moving target with regulation. But from my experience working with PADEP and really they're really listening to the feedback from municipalities and really trying to develop a program that's is really is trying to um accomplish the goals of water quality, but also understanding all of the day-to-day challenges that a municipality has to deal with, and knowing one of those things is mitigating or reducing flooding and saying, I know when helping to develop the pollutant reduction plans, one of the common feedback that I would hear from municipalities would be like, why are we putting a project here when we have flooding issues here? And so kind of, even though things are changing this permit term, it's changing, in my opinion, for the better. And I think that if you just kind of open your mind to being able to, you're gonna have to, the requirement's not going away. So the mental shift and kind of embracing it and being able to use this kind of regulatory mechanism as a positive spin-off to implementing projects that can have multifaceted benefits is kind of where I think that a good mentality would be to start.
For me, I would definitely have to agree with, Beth and Jason. Unfortunately, we live in interesting times and things are constantly changing at all levels, at state, federal, local, across the board. So the more things we're able to get an idea of in blue sky days, the better we'll be able to handle things when things happen later. So coordinate with your floodplain administrators, coordinate with your local and county emergency management coordinators to identify potential projects, be that at the individual level with property owners or at the community level. And even if it's just to get a general idea of things we could possibly do, we could submit a phased project, as kind of Jason was alluding to, or even a scoping project to put in for those studies to identify long-term solutions to these problems. So the more we're able to do up front when we have the time, the better we'll be able to handle things when stuff changes, or after a disaster when your focus may be on more immediate concerns.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers. So what are some best practices for ensuring vulnerable populations are included in stormwater and hazard mitigation plans?
May you repeat that question?
Sorry, what are some best practices for ensuring vulnerable populations are included in stormwater and hazard mitigation planning?
So, I mean, I in terms of best practices, what I wanted to just mention, which I kind of breezed over in the presentation, just because of the fact of the limited time, is the fact is that some of that is built into the structure of the permit requirements for this new draft permit. And so, for example, there was a 10% volume management credit that was going to be offered for stormwater control measures that were proposed as part of a volume management plan in environmental justice areas. And the reason for that is there's concern, that the more densely urban populated communities that may have vulnerable populations may not have affordable locations to implement stormwater control measures. They partner with municipalities that have space that isn't already developed, which would mean that green infrastructure is not located within our vulnerable communities. And so, making sure that there's a balance of those types of projects and being able to share that green infrastructure as a resource, I think is that is why that mechanism was inserted into the permit requirements. So I think, so that's not necessarily a strategy, but it's a strategy from the regulatory side of things. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that answer. We have a question here in the chat. There is a growing recommendation from municipalities to create stormwater authorities. What is the alternative to creating this separate authority?
So second-class townships are able to adopt a stormwater fee without creating a stormwater authority at this time. And currently waiting on the legislation for boroughs and first-class townships. And if you're a home rule charter, then, you know, depending on your home rule charter, you may be able to adopt a stormwater fee without creating an authority. And then, you know, then there's just the individual like expertise of individual solicitors in terms of how, you know, if certain municipalities, how they interpret the borough code or however, you have to kind of just go on your best advice. That's a little bit outside of my expertise as not a legal professional, but that is the general, I guess, the general answer. And I think there's a lot of hesitation right now, and Jason alluded to this, with there's, you know, a pretty high profile court case with Westchester Borough and Westchester University that people are waiting to hear the outcome of before adopting stormwater fees at this point. Some are still moving forward with it. So I guess it's just to pay close attention to that, pay close attention to the whether first class townships and boroughs that passes they're able to adopt a fee without creating an authority.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, alternatives include, you know, looking for existing, you know, you may have a sanitary authority that might have interest, you know, and that's, I think, down the road, in the next 20 plus years, you may see some of these sanitary authorities turn into both stormwater and sanitary, because a lot of your sanitary authorities are already watershed based. So that might be something coming down the road. That might be something you explore now. Some municipalities that, you know, boroughs and things like that, who don't want to go through a home rule charter change, you do see them increase a tax, and then they might specifically direct that towards a stormwater part of their, um, you know, how do I want to put it? When they budget, you know, it gets more into the budgeting side. They may put that in direct line items to be stormwater. So dedicated funds was the term I was looking for. Sometimes you'll see boroughs go to a dedicated fund system for stormwater. Because yes, creating authority has costs and implications as well. So, but I do know, as Beth had said, you know, a lot of municipalities, everyone around us is kind of just waiting to see how the courts roll, with how this goes before anyone jumps one direction or another.
Yeah, thank you for your answers. We have another question here in the chat. How can municipalities best engage state or regional agencies like PEMA and or nonprofits like Center Pittsburgh or CWP with collaboration efforts or addressing stormwater concerns?
So I can speak to that a little bit, at least with our hazard mitigation office. So I know the regional offices, so PEMA, Western, Central, and Eastern, will typically have a staff member assigned to them who handles volunteer organizations and things of that nature. So they may be a good first line contact for those sort of items. As far as headquarters goes, the biggest thing you can do honestly is just reach out to us at a resource account or to Rick Deal through his email and let us know if you have a general question or concerns, identify potential resources that may be available. Or even if we don't have a grant program within our immediate office, there are other departments and offices at the state level or other coordinating agencies. For example, Pennsylvania Silver Jackets is a great team that has United States Army Corps of Engineers, Pennsylvania Emergency Management, and others. So we could at least refer you to those outside agencies, depending on your individual needs.
All right,
I
thank
would
you.
just say you can reach out to CW, you can reach out to me if you want to get in touch with Center for Watershed Protection, have any questions about our resources or technical assistance that we can provide.
All right, thank you. We have one more question and then we have to move on to some closing items. But the last question we have here is there a timeline for when the expansion of boroughs, et cetera, to implement fees without the authority will occur?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't, it's held up in like I don't follow the trajectory closely, but it's in the House or something like that right now, and it hasn't been there's no anticipated timeline that I know of. But I would, I will say there's some groups out there. I don't know if Sustainable PA is one of them, PA Municipal League, Penn Future, that track these kind of things regularly. So that's who I would contact to figure out what the status is, because I don't follow it closely.
Yeah, just a real brief. The problem becomes it's being challenged whether it's a fee or a tax. And that's the basis of how it then can you charge nonprofits, churches, school districts, things that affect. So if you're at the end of the day, what's going to happen is it's just going to change your formula with the stormwater fee. So it may be more in residential units than across the entirety of the municipality. So if you're in a municipality that is going down this path and you're fairly confident in that, do your research, but you may continue down that path even with the pending court case, just knowing that the outcome might be a change of the amount of payees. That's all.
All right, yeah, thank you all. Thank you all for these very comprehensive answers. Next slide, please. So here are some upcoming events that you might be interested in attending. On the 26th of this month there will be a Helping Municipalities Unpack HR1 and Continue Investing in Resilient Solutions presentation. On September 9th, there'll be an Eastern Sustainable Pennsylvania workshop. On October 9th, there'll be the next SCDN Policy Connection webinar. And on November 4th will be the Western Pennsylvania Sustainable PA workshop. And you can also check our website for more information on these and other sustainability events at sustainablepittsburgh.org/events. Thank you all for coming. And if you have any questions, you can email me or my colleague Sawyer Seiler. Thank you all for coming.